What is up YouTube? I'm Royal, I'm rank 1 Wildrift, and in this video we're breaking down the newest patch notes for patch 6.2c. There's actually huge buffs and some very nice nerfs to some really OP things, so let's take a look at what's gonna be super OP next patch and what's gonna be quite a bit weaker. So let's start off with Nasus. So when his first ability defeats a champion, larger monster or larger minion, instead of getting 10 stacks, you're gonna get 14, which gives you 4 more stacks per wave when you kill the big minion. And if you ever get to farm some jungle camps, then it's a few more stacks. This will help him accelerate a little more, but again, Nasus, after the huge nerfs he received, plus the meta being unfavorable to late game scaling champions, he's pretty weak. This does help, but it's definitely not gonna make Nasus super OP or anything. His first ability will just do a little more damage. It's a bit of a placebo buff, but he'll get whatever he can. Senna. Senna is already quite strong if you can play her in the right team comp, right? The main issue that Senna has is that you pretty much always lock your team into double ADCs when you play her support and you have 2 marksmen, right? The best way to play Senna is you play Senna with an unconventional like support, right? It's kind of like Senna ADC, but you actually go the support item, and the unconventional support is the one who farms. That could be things like Gragas, things like Alistar, something with frontline, right? Usually when you play Senna, you want to have a frontline, but what a lot of people do is they play Senna support, then you have some random ADC, you have a mage in the mid lane, and if your team doesn't pick 2 tanks in the jungle and Baron lane roles, which let's face it, most people don't, you're in a terrible position with Senna. So Senna is actually a really strong champion, and these buffs make her really strong, but again, you need to have a big front line to play Senna. So whether you're dual with your ADC and you have him play a different champion, or you pick Senna ADC and beg your support to farm minions, both can work. But I think Senna is actually a really good champion right now. Just you need the right team comp, you need a big beefy front line to make Senna work. So these are some very nice buffs for Senna, making her one of the best ADCs in my opinion, or one of the best marksman champions. Let's look at Jayce, which is actually one of the biggest buffs this patch, and that's right, Jungle Jayce is back, baby. So when Jayce was first released, Jungle Jayce was really oppressive. It was really OP, so they nerfed it really hard, making his first ability only do 50% damage to jungle monsters, which has now been increased to 80%. So his clear speed is actually gonna be a lot better. He got 4 base AD, which is always really big. When they buff base AD or nerf base AD on champions, they're pretty much like, we want the champion to be meta, so we're gonna buff his base AD, and that usually almost immediately makes the champions good because of how impactful base AD is. So it's nice to see that they want Jayce to be back into the meta. He hasn't been good in quite a while, so this is a nice buff. His first ability, so this is the wrong icon. This is supposed to be he's like a ranged form first ability, Shock Blast. So they're using the To the Skies icon by accident, I think. So it will do 45% damage increase when it goes through the gate. So this is a really nice buff for both lane and jungle Jayce. Obviously it's more of a buff for jungle Jayce, and that's kind of what they're targeting, but this will help lane Jayce as well. I suspect Jayce might, I'm not sure if he's gonna be super OP in the jungle. I'm gonna have to see how fast his jungle clear is before I can decide, and obviously I will update you guys during my tier list, but I think this buff definitely helps both. Lane Jayce will actually be a decent pick now. The problem with lane Jayce, especially in the mid lane right now, is that there's just better, like you can play mages instead, so these AD picks are kind of suffering like Jayce, like Zed, right? He's suffering a bit in the mid lane too. In the Baron lane, this also helps a lot, right? Base AD is super helpful in the Baron lane, where you need to have just raw stats to versus a lot of these bruisers. So overall, really nice buff to Jayce. I expect him to be one of the best champions next patch. I really want to see what the jungle clear speed looks like, but I do suspect that jungle Jayce could be really good. This is the most ridiculous buff I have ever seen in my life. So usually Riot, when they want to buff a champion, they buff them like overall, right? Like what they're doing to Jayce. They're giving him a bit of everything. Vi's ultimate is probably the most disgusting ability in the game, especially in the early game. And lowering the cooldown by 10 seconds in the early game on an ability that already felt like a super short cooldown is ridiculous. This is a ridiculous buff in my opinion. Vi is already one of the best junglers in the game, and this will definitely push her to one of the strongest early game junglers. Being able to gank every 60 seconds, being able to gank with ultimate on Vi, that is a massive early game buff for Vi. She's going to be able to really snowball games, and especially this is the meta where you want to have a strong early game. You want to start the snowballing early. The charge time on Relentless Force will help quite a bit with her clear speed as well, so she'll be able to clear camps quickly and gank more often, which is exactly what Vi wants. I expect her to be one of the best junglers next patch, definitely in the top 5, if not the top 3. But now let's look at what will probably be one of the other top 3 junglers coming into the next patch, and that's Kha'Zix. Again, they're doing the base attack damage buff. Like I said earlier, when they buff a champion's base attack damage, they want them to be more meta. What's interesting about junglers, when you buff the base attack damage, it makes their clear speed faster. That's why, Jayce's clear speed will be a lot faster too, also because of the buffs to his first ability, clear speed, right? But Kha'Zix's clear speed will be a lot faster, and they're reducing the cooldown of his first ability by 0.5 seconds, which might not seem like a lot, but keep in mind, Kha'Zix spams this ability when he's clearing his jungle. This is his main tool for jungle clearing, especially after he evolves his first ability, right? The cooldown gets reduced by half, so it's gonna be 1.5 seconds now instead of 1.75. In the early game, you're going to be able to get just way more first abilities on your first few clears. So overall, this is a very, very big buff for Kha'Zix. One of the biggest issues that Kha'Zix has really held him back from being on the same level as a Lee Sin, right? Is his clear speed is slow, right? His early game clear speed is quite slow, so he's not really able to snowball. He's not really able to invade as much as he would like, right? But this is a massive buff, and they're also buffing the damage by 10. So his clear speed is going to be so much faster. I suspect his first clear speed will be at least 8 seconds faster with this. Just from these changes, 8 seconds faster, which might not seem like a lot, but trust me, it's huge. And that's just in the early game. In the late game, in the mid to late game, being able to have your first ability on a lower cooldown with increased damage and increased base damage is gonna be insane. Kha'Zix will be able to snowball insanely quickly. So I suspect that if you give Kha'Zix any sort of lead next patch, he will be insanely snowballing the game. I've already been playing a bit of Kha'Zix this season, but after this buff, he's definitely gonna be an integral part of my champion pool. My champion pool right now is Lee Sin, Vi, and Kha'Zix in the jungle for the most part, and I guess I play a bit of Viego. But so I'm really liking these buffs. I guess Kha'Zix will get banned more often, but Kha'Zix might become my go-to jungler instead of Lee Sin after these buffs. These are massive, massive Kha'Zix buffs. So let's talk a bit about ADCs. Kalista, Jinx, and Twitch are receiving some buffs. If you have been following my tier list, you know that these champions are usually on the bottom of my tier list. Jinx, not so much, but definitely Kalista and Twitch when it comes to ADC. So one caveat before we even talk about ADCs, we need to scroll down and talk about this item change, which is the last change of the game. It's the Bloodthirster. It has been Bloodthirster meta for quite a while, right? Everyone builds Bloodthirster, every ADC builds Bloodthirster, and one of the big reasons why they build it is actually the bonus armor and magic resist you receive with the shield. Pretty much every champion has, every team comp has at least one anti-shield item, right? Because of how OP anti-shield is when everyone's running Bloodthirster. But the nice thing about Bloodthirster is that it wasn't just the shield. You got 20 armor and 20 magic resist, which in the early game is really insane. Like when you have base 35 magic resist, and you have an item that just gives you 20 magic resist as the lifeline passive, while still giving all the great ADC stats, it makes you really bulky, it makes you really tanky. So Bloodthirster was always a really insane first item power spike. Now they're reducing the armor and magic resist, which is really good, and they're actually making 100 more gold, which I actually think is the better nerf here. I think this was the right way to approach nerfing Bloodthirster, because it's making it less accessible in the early game. In my opinion, they should keep Bloodthirster as strong as it is, but just increase the gold to 3,200 or 3,300, Make it an unappealing early game choice because of how expensive it is, right? Make it so that you have to really fight for that power spike. So obviously this changes ADC quite a lot. This changes a lot of champions, quite a lot that have been relying on Bloodthirster. This is actually the first decent nerf. I still think it's a good item, but I don't think it's as overwhelmingly OP as it was in the previous patch. So now we talked about Bloodthirster, I think we're more equipped to tackle the ADC changes. So, Kalista, base attack damage per level is going from 4.5 to 5. This is actually a decent buff if you think about it, right? You get 14 levels throughout the game. So that's 7 more AD at max level. It's decent buff, right? We always like a base damage changes. Last time they buffed Kalista, they actually had base damage buffs on the patch notes, but they were not in the game. So I would wait and see in-game if these changes have actually been implemented, or if Riot is trolling us again. But what's more interesting, right? They are buffing her base attack damage, her base attack damage per level, but they're also buffing the AD scaling on her third ability. It's going from 46% at max rank to 57%. So that works even nicer with the other buff on her base attack damage. What's also interesting is that the base damage is going up from, it's staying the same at level 1, which good, right? Because this is a really strong ability level in the first levels. From 24 to 36 at max rank. So pretty much each auto attack, right? Because it's each auto attack applies a stack. So every single Kalista auto attack is, in theory, assuming you proc your third ability, doing 12 more damage and an 11% attack damage scaling. So this might seem like a small buff, but it's actually really big for a champion like Kalista. Kalista is one of the strongest early game champions that snowballs really hard, so the meta does favor her too. And this is genuinely the buff she really needed to become one of the stronger ADCs. Do I think that this makes her better than on-hit Varus? Probably not. Do I think it puts her on the same tier as the second best ADC? Something like MF right now, right? Something like Corki. I guess Corki's actually getting nerfed this patch. We'll go into that in a bit. But this is a decent buff. This is a good buff for Kalista, and I think she will be one of the better ADCs this patch, especially if you have like a duo queue. Kalista synergizes really well with duo. What I am afraid of, and this will likely happen, is solo lane Kalista. This buff is like Baron lane Kalista is looking at me like this right now. She's like looking wide. Every Baron lane Kalista player is looking wide with their little binoculars, and they're like, oh my god. Because this is a massive buff for solo lane Kalista as well. Mostly because this really targets her late game, right? It targets not necessarily her late game, but it targets her mid to late game. So once she gets a few levels on her third ability, right? Which is what Baron lane Kalista does. Because she's not sharing XP with her support, she's able to get levels more quickly, getting more attack damage, and of course maxing out her rend faster. So this is a really nice buff for solo lane Kalista, and I do expect to see a little more of that. Under the right circumstance, of course. Don't pick Kalista when you have Kindred jungle, Corki mid, Jinx ADC, Senna support. We don't need 5 ADCs. Even though I guess you can remake nowadays. Let's move on to the Jinx buff. This is a nice Jinx buff, right? It's small and nice. Jinx was not necessarily super weak if you've been following my tier lists. I think after an A tier, she's not weak, but she doesn't feel really strong in the late game unless you've gotten a lead. So this will kind of allow her to feel stronger in the late game, even if you haven't gotten a lead. And of course, if you do get a lead, this will help you snowball a lot harder. Jinx Milio has been one of the most popular bot lanes as of right now. I've been seeing a lot of Jinx Milio in high elo, and this will just increase the problem, I guess. But this is a nice buff for Jinx. She's going to be a little better than she was last patch, but it's not a massive change by any means. But for an already decent ADC, it's not bad. Now let's talk about Twitch. We get a whole AD per level. Meaning that she gets 14 AD in the late game. His third ability's mana cost is going down, meaning he doesn't really have to worry about running out of mana anymore. A lot of times with Twitch you would actually run out of mana because you'd spam your first ability after every kill and assist. Your abilities cost quite a bit of mana. So this is nice, right? The ADCs usually don't have mana problems from Wild Rift, and Twitch will be joining them as a champion with no mana problems. The AP scaling staying the same, which is good because we absolutely hate AP Twitch. But the bonus AD is going from 30% to 32%. Keep in mind that this is bonus AD, so the attack damage per level he gains is base AD. So this buff does not help with this buff. Like with Kalista, it's different, right? Because it's just AD, it's not bonus AD, so it does help. But with Twitch, it doesn't help because it's bonus AD, right? But this is a nice buff on his third ability, which has felt very underwhelming. It doesn't really feel like it does a lot of damage, so this will definitely help. The cooldown is ultimate. This is a very nice buff for Twitch, and I think this is the right direction to take him. Team fights happen all the time, and you simply can't team fight without your ultimate on Twitch. He's so weak without his ultimate. And the bonus attack damage he gains is actually buffed by 10 as well. And this does work with a Contaminate buff, right? Because it's bonus attack damage. So overall, a really nice change for Twitch. Will this make him super OP? No, but this will put him as a viable and decent choice ADC. He has been one of the weakest ADCs for a while, so we do like this change. Ambessa. So they're nerfing the base attack damage of Ambessa. The problem with Ambessa is that she's really OP in the jungle and like okay-ish in the Baron lane. So unfortunately, this nerf hurts both jungle and Baron lane Ambessa. Baron lane Ambessa kind of dies from this because the base attack damage, again, like we said, when they want a champion to be meta, they buff the base attack damage, but they can also do the opposite. If they don't want a champion in the meta anymore, they will nerf the base attack damage. It's a shame that Ambessa top lane has to, or Ambessa Baron lane has to become so weak to make up for how OP Ambessa jungle is. But yeah, these nerfs are somewhat small. The cutting sweep definitely hurts Baron lane Ambessa quite a bit, making her trade patterns a lot harder. This doesn't completely kill Ambessa as a champion. I still think she's going to be probably S tier or high A tier in the jungle, but Baron lane Ambessa will suffer a lot from these changes, I think. So yeah, it's not the end of Ambessa, especially if you main her in the jungle. She's still going to be playable, but she's not going to be the best jungler in the game. Kayle nerfs. So these nerfs are actually quite small. They might seem like huge nerfs, but you only lose 2 base AD, and you only lose 0.5 per level. And this doesn't really matter because with Kayle you're already insanely OP in the late game. The reason for this nerf, and as you can see, they're targeting bonus attack damage from 10%, it's going down to 5%. They're pretty much killing AD Kayle, which I don't really think it's necessary. I think the only reason why AD Kayle was really, really good in the last few patches was because of Bloodthirster. Right, because Bloodthirster allowed you to, once you get Bloodthirster, it was really hard to punish Kayle because of the extra bonus stats you would get and the shield. So it was really hard to punish Kayle in the early game, and that's kind of what makes Kayle actually good because she's able to scale for free. So instead, they're just killing AD Kayle is what's happening. AD Kayle just probably won't be viable after these nerfs. You can still play AP Kayle, so AP Kayle is still fine, right? It's pretty much the same champion. You do lose like very slight damage, but you don't really care. Unfortunately, the problem with Kayle is deeper than this. I think what they really need to do with Kayle is realize that her late game is too overpowered and her early game is too weak. And I get that that's the champion theme, but they need to kind of balance out a little more. They need to improve her early game and they need to nerf her late game so they can make her into a more complete champion and not this champion that is really, really bad against good players. I can punch her in the early game, but really good if she's left alone. Like Kha'Zix is a great example of a champion that, yes, is broken later into the game, but has potential in the early to mid game, right? He can still actually play the game. Kayle can't really play the game in the early to mid game. She just farms up with Bloodthirster while hiding under her turret. It's a very toxic playstyle that I don't think is good versus good players, but they're killing it. AD Kayle is done for. Corki. So they're, and this is the kind of nerf that I've been expecting for super long. He's base attack damage and Spellblade dealing 20% bonus true damage is just insanely oppressive, especially with the Essence Reaver. He's able to do way too much damage. I've been saying since his rework that this ability is really the problem, and that's what's keeping Corki OP for so long. So they're lowering it to 16% bonus true damage, which is actually quite a bit of a nerf. His first ability will also be doing a little less damage. I don't think Corki has been super overwhelming OP this patch. I feel like this is actually the weakest he's been since his release, probably. Or like the reworked Corki, right? That's what I'm talking about. So yeah, this is the decent nerf in my opinion. Corki will go back to being like A tier, maybe B tier, probably A tier. I don't think he's that weak. This isn't that bad of a nerf. But there's just better ADCs right now, especially with all the buffs we're seeing to the other ADCs this patch. Now let's look at the items really quickly. Hullbreaker. Hullbreaker has been underwhelming. I feel like a big part of why it's underwhelming is because it's really hard to proc the extra damage. And it's not the way it used to be, like the old Hullbreaker that made you invincible in the side lane, right? So I think this is a good buff overall. Making every 4th attack does help a lot with champions that don't have attack speed. Because, like, who is this item tailored for? Like, which Baron laner split pushers have so much attack speed and want to build a bruiser item? Like, Trinimir doesn't want to build a bruiser item, he wants to build crit. Jax, I guess, with Trinity Force. Fiora, maybe, right? But all these champions don't get that many auto attacks. You might proc Hullbreaker like once, maybe twice in a fight. So lowering it to 4th auto attacks really does help other champions proc it, right? I guess Yone could maybe build, but he prefers crit as well. Also, such champions like Sion, who are the primary Hullbreaker users. When you think of Hullbreaker, you think of like Sion, you think of Fiora. Those champions will be able to actually proc this a little more. Extra 5 AD always helps, and 1% movement speed does nothing, right? It's like very slight buff. But this is a nice change for Hullbreaker, and I think we will be seeing it a lot more this patch, which will be interesting. All the tier items have been buffed. So the buff, to simplify it for you guys, because there's a lot of like repeated reading, pretty much before you could get a tier stack 3 times every 12 seconds. Now it's 3 times every 10 seconds, meaning that you get more tier stacks as you spam abilities. Most people don't pay attention to this. It's not like you're calculating in your head the seconds. So passively, you'll just stack your tiers faster, which is a really nice change for tier champions that have felt like they can't really scale as quickly. So Ezreal, right, with tier, he feels like he's a little weaker than other ADCs who just go rush Bloodthirster and immediately OP. Ezreal with Manamine doesn't feel that strong right away. So this is going to help him a lot. It's going to help Kha'Zix, who's already the best mid laner. It's going to help Ryze, which I like to see since I'm absolutely destroying with Ryze this season. I have like an 80% win rate. He's like my 3rd most played champion. So yeah, it helps a lot, all of the tier champions. I don't think that this will necessarily cause non-tier champions to build tier, but the champions that do rely on tier, this will help a lot. Maybe we can see more tier Orianna. But again, like champions that don't like... that didn't buy tier before probably won't get it because of these changes. Ural Sunfire Cape, this is actually a really nice change. This is a nice buff to Sunfire Cape, by the way. One of the problems with Sunfire Cape is that it doesn't really give you good stats. It only gave you a bunch of health, which wasn't even that much health. And it does have a really good passive, but without the stats to back it up, it makes it really hard to have it be useful if you're not already ahead. So Sunfire actually becomes a good first item. I can see it be a good first item on a lot of Baron laners like Shen. I can see it be a good first item on some supports like Leona, right? So did I call it Sunfire Cape? Sunfire Aegis, I'm sorry. Sunfire Cape was the old one. But overall, this is a nice buff to Sunfire Cape. It's more of an adjustment, but it's low-key a buff. I think this will help it be a quite a bit better item, especially in the early game. It's going to help a lot of junglers. Rammus, right? Rammus loves armor, so getting 20 armor for 75 HP is super worth it for him. So I do expect more Sunfire this patch. And again, we're already talking about the Bloodthirster change. Good change. Obviously, any nerfs to Bloodthirster are welcome. It doesn't completely kill the item, but it's definitely a lot weaker now. So thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. Comment down below what you're most excited to try out in the newest patch. And while you're down there commenting, make sure you click the subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching.